of the apex, the hunter's atonement. Written by Thway, Sett, Shan. The journey began where the pavement ended. For hours, the old jeep climbed the serpentine tracks of the northern highlands, its engine groaning against the silence of the pine forests. Grace pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching the world disappear into a thick veil of fog. She had left the bright lights from the city for Lwe Mwe, a remote mountain village that barely existed on a map. To her, it was a mission of mercy. To the driver, it was a place to escape before sunset. "We can't go any further, Doctor," he said, stopping at a muddy fork in the road. "They're waiting for you at the gate. My advice, don't linger under the trees." Grace stepped out into the mountain chill. As she approached the village, figures emerged from the mist, carrying lanterns, though it was still late afternoon. Their eyes were hollow, darting toward the tree line with every snap of a twig. They did not look like people welcoming a doctor. They looked like survivors of a siege. Silas, the village elder, stepped forward. He wore a traditional head wrap, his wrinkled face hiding deep anxiety. "Welcome, Dr. Grace," he said. "We have waited for a healer, but please hurry. The light is a luxury we cannot afford tonight." As they walked through the village, Grace noticed deep three-pronged claw marks carved into the wooden doors. Every window was reinforced with iron bars, timber slats. By 5 o'clock, the sound of heavy bolts sliding into place echoed through the valley. They reached a small wooden clinic at the edge of the village, uncomfortably close to the forest. "Your sanctuary," Silas said, handing her a brass key. "In the city, you fear the living. Here, we fear the nature of the moon. If you hear a cry, stay inside. If you hear a knock, stay silent, especially as the moon grows full." Grace opened her mouth to ask about wolves or mountain lions, but Silas was already retreating into the fog. She turned to enter the clinic, but a prickle at the back of her neck made her freeze. She was not alone. Under an ancient pine tree stood a tall man with a recurved bow across his back. This was Cale. Moonlight caught the white bandage wrapped around his forearm. "You're bleeding," Grace said. Kyle looked at her with deep, burnished gold eyes, not like a man looking at a doctor, but like a predator assessing something new in his territory. "A scratch from the brush," he replied. "I have medicine." "Keep your medicine, doctor. You need it for the others." His gaze hardened. "The mist hides many things. Some are animals, some were once men. Tonight, the moon is nearly ripe. Lock your heart as tightly as you lock that door." Then he vanished into the fog, moving with a silence impossible for a man of his size. Grace entered the clinic and lit a kerosene lamp. She tried to tell herself it was only superstition. But then, from the high ridges, came a sound. It was not a wolf's howl. It was deeper, mournful, and guttural, like a human scream trapped inside the throat of a tiger. Grace looked at the heavy timber door and finally understood why the villagers feared the night. Inside the clinic, the world shrank to the golden circle of her lamp. The wooden walls groaned under the mountain wind. Grace arranged her surgical tools, letting the clink of metal calm her nerves. Then came a sound from the porch. Thump. Something heavy had landed outside. Grace froze, her hand hovering over a scalpel. Then came the smell. Wet fur, blood, and the musk of a predator. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It was not a knock. It was the sound of claws dragging slowly across the door. "Is someone there?" Grace whispered. The scratching stopped. Deep, wet breathing replaced it. Then the brass handle began to turn. Silas said the bolts would hold, she told herself. Crack. A massive charcoal gray claw punched through the wood as if it were paper. With an explosion of splinters, the door was torn from its mountings. Standing in the threshold, framed by the full moon, was a nightmare made flesh. It stood 7 feet tall, a grotesque fusion of man and tiger. Coarse black fur covered its shoulders, but its face was the worst part. It was a distorted mask of Garrett, Silas's son, human features stretched over a predator's skull, teeth lengthened into yellow daggers. Garrett lunged. Grace fell back, tripping over a chair as the beast's shadow swallowed her. Thwack. A heavy wooden arrow struck the doorframe beside Garrett's head. "Get back, Grace." Kel dropped from the rafters, hunting blade in hand. His movements were impossibly fast. He tackled Garrett, and the two crashed through a medicine cabinet in a storm of glass and pills. Grace watched in horror. Kyle was holding his own against a monster twice his size. But when Garrett slashed his shirt open, Grace saw Kyle's skin ripple. His muscles pulsed with terrifying energy. His fingers stretched, nails sharpening into talons. Then Kyle turned toward the lamp. His eyes were no longer brown. They were brilliant gold, the same eyes as the beast. Kyle roared and slammed Garrett into the wall hard enough to crack the beams. Garrett, sensing a stronger predator, scrambled out through the shattered doorway and vanished into the night. Kyle stood in the wreckage, his back to Grace, trembling. His hands were still clawed, fighting the urge to chase the beast. Grace lifted a syringe with shaking hands. "Kyle, stay still." He turned, half his face covered in fur, fangs bared. For one terrible second, Grace thought he would kill her. Then the gold in his eyes flickered. The claws retracted. The beast retreated, leaving only a broken man in the ruins. "I told you," Kyle rasped. "Lock the door, because I'm not the only one with a monster in my blood." Outside, torches flickered in the fog. Men shouted. Hounds barked. "They're coming," Kyle hissed, clutching a wound in his shoulder. "Silas won't let you leave now. You've seen what his son has become." Grace grabbed her medical bag and took Kyle's hand. "Then we run. You said there was a way to end this. Take me there." They slipped out the back just as torchlight reached the clinic. The forest swallowed them, a maze of pines thorns, and fog. Kyle led the way without a lantern, but they were not only hunted by men. Above them, branches groaned. A heavy shadow leapt from tree to tree, silhouetted against the moon. Garrett was stalking them. "Don't look up," Kyle whispered. "He's waiting for us to panic." After an hour of climbing, the trees opened onto a jagged cliff. Across the misty abyss hung a decaying rope bridge. "The bridge to Nong Kam," Kale said. "The villagers won't cross it. They believe the ground beyond is cursed." Grace looked down into the black void. "It looks like it's about to snap." "It only has to hold for two. Go." Grace stepped onto the bridge. The rotten planks groaned beneath her boots. Halfway across, a crack echoed through the canyon. Behind them, Silas and his armed men arrived. "Kill the hunter. Bring the doctor back," Silas shouted. Gunfire erupted. A bullet cut the rope near Grace's head. Another struck Cale in the thigh. "Cale!" Grace screamed. "Cross it. Don't look back." Instead of fighting the men, Cale hacked at the bridge ropes. "What are you doing?" "Ending the trail." With a final strike, the rope snapped. Grace lunged for the far ledge as the bridge collapsed into the abyss. Cale, clinging to the falling wreckage, slammed into the cliff below her. Grace pulled him up, bloodied and barely conscious. They were safe from Silas for the moment, but the air beyond the bridge felt heavy, metallic, and ancient. Before them yawned a massive hole in the mountainside. Rotten timbers framed the entrance like the ribs of a giant beast. A rusted sign hung from a chain. "Nong Kam Mine. Only the lifeless may enter." From deep within the earth came a low, rhythmic hum, the heartbeat of the curse. "We're here," Kyle whispered, "the source of the blood, the end of the hunt." Inside the mine, the air tasted of copper and old death. Grace and Kyle moved through the tunnels by the weak glow of her penlight and the pale jade veins pulsing in the walls. The path split in two. To the right, a tunnel glittered with raw gemstones. To the left, a narrow fissure dripped with dark water. "My grandfather called the right path the path of lust," Kyle said. "Those who enter never return. We take the left, the path of renunciation." They crawled through the wet stone until the tunnel opened into a vast cathedral of rock. At its center lay a black glass-like pool. Rising from the water was a stone pedestal holding an ancient silver vial. "Step away from the altar, hunter." Grace spun around. Silas emerged from a hidden passage, flanked by two armed men. His rifle was raised, but his eyes were fixed on the vial. "You don't understand," Silas said. "This is not a disease. It is a crown. My ancestors ruled these mountains because they were the apex. My son is not a monster. He is a god in the making, and that serum will make his power permanent." "It's eaten him alive," Kyle roared. A howl exploded from above. Garrett dropped from the ceiling, crashing onto the stone floor. The mind's energy fed him. His muscles twisted and expanded. His fur fell away, revealing scarred leather-like skin. He was no longer a man. He was a prehistoric engine of slaughter. "Now, Garrett," Silas shouted. "Kill the hunter. Bring me the vial." Garrett lunged. Gale met him midair. The two slammed into the jade pool, sending glowing water into the air. Gale fought with everything he had, but Garrett was stronger. The beast pinned him down, jaws opening to crush his skull. "Grace! The vial!" Grace rushed to the pedestal. Silas fired. A bullet grazed her arm, but she did not stop. She seized the silver vial. "Give it to me," Silas screamed. Grace saw the ancient script carved into the stone. To heal the spirit, one must release the breath. The serum was not meant to be drunk. She threw the vial at Garrett's feet. Crack! The silver glass shattered. Instead of liquid, a blinding white mist burst outward. It smelled of rain and fresh earth. The mist wrapped around Garrett, entering his eyes, mouth, and skin. His roar broke into a human sob. His body shrank. Claws retracted. Skin replaced the scarred hide. He collapsed into the pool, naked and shivering, a man once more. "No!" Silas screamed. "My power, my legacy." He ignored his son and lunged toward the broken vial, desperate to save even a drop. His feet struck the glittering path of lust. The ground vanished beneath him. As Silas fell into the abyss, the ghosts of the miners his family had sacrificed rose from below like black smoke, pulling him into the silence of the earth. The mine groaned. The jade veins faded to gray. "We have to go," Kyle said, his eyes finally soft and human. Together, Grace and Kyle lifted the unconscious Garrett and stumbled toward the water exit as the ancient mine collapsed behind them. The surface of the mountain lake shattered as three figures broke through, gasping for air. Dawn painted the water in bruised purple and gold. Grace dragged herself onto the shore. Beside her, Kyle pulled Garrett onto the dry earth. For a long moment, only the lapping water and the dying rumble of the mine filled the air. Grace looked up. The full moon, once a harbinger of blood, was sinking behind the peaks. It looked harmless now, just a pale stone in the sky. "It's over," Kyle said. He stared at his hands. They were scarred and trembling, but human. No claws, no fur. Only the hands of a man who had finally laid down his burden. When they returned to Lwe Mwe, the villagers were gathered in the square. Their doors, once bolted in terror, now stood open. Garrett was handed over to the authorities. He did not fight. There would be trials. There would be atonement. But for the first time, his mind was his own. Weeks became months. The clinic was rebuilt with wide windows and no iron bars. The claw marks on the doors were sanded down until they became faint patterns in the wood. Lwe Mwe was no longer a ghost village. It was a community again. 1 year later, the village celebrated the festival of the moon. Tables stood beneath the open sky. Lanterns glowed. Children laughed in places where no one had once dared to stand after sunset. Grace stepped out of the clinic and walked toward the ridge, where Kyle stood beside a motorcycle. He no longer carried a bow. Instead, he wore the badge of a forest ranger. "The moon is full tonight," Grace said. Kyle looked up. His eyes were steady and warm. "It's just a moon, Grace," he said with a soft smile. "Just light in the dark." Together, they looked over the valley. The curse of Nawon Kam was buried under 1,000,000 tons of stone, and the blood of the hunter had finally run clear. As they walked down toward the village lights, the only thing following them was the echo of their own footsteps, the sound of two people walking toward a future where the moon no longer hunted them and the dark no longer had teeth.